And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now on to marine forecasts. First up here, well, we've got this storm with gale force winds, cold front here, or occluded front. Main low pressure just back to the northwest there. Windy rain here in advance of that front, pushing up to St. Lawrence Island this afternoon. Otherwise, winds pretty light over the interior today with variable clouds and some thunderstorms developing this afternoon over the Alaska Range and then up into the central interior in areas. Dry over the Panhandle, some sunshine, a lot of sunshine over the eastern North Slope and the Brooks Range area down in toward the Yukon River there. And for tonight, this front weakens as it moves onshore and stays pretty windy though, especially up across the Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait. Low center staying back to the west there. Drier, less wind behind that front and clouds, light winds over the Gulf of Alaska. Risk of a shower maybe along the coast of the Panhandle, just a very slight chance, but the risk is there. Otherwise dry with light winds and diminishing showers over the interior with partly to mostly cloudy skies to mostly clear in other areas. For tomorrow, this front hangs up along the coast, continues to weaken. Wind field really dropping off here, the wind speeds, especially into Bristol Bay. And still pretty windy though for St. Lawrence Island up into the Bering Strait. Dry, lighter westerly winds for the Aleutians. Hot over the eastern interior, central interior, temperatures upper 70s to mid 80s, extending all the way up to the North Slope and near 70 or into the 70s portions of the Arctic coast. But look for rain on Sunday to push up to the North Gulf Coast with cloudier, keeping it a little cooler here, but dry for Cook Inlet and the Manauskas-Susitna Valley. The Panhandle, not too bad. Again, about the same there, variable clouds, light winds, mild temperatures. And for the marine or the actual coastal water forecast here in the Central Coast, light winds at about 10 knots out of the east-northeast, southeast 10, south coast, variable 5 to 10 on the north coast. Central northern inside waters, variable winds 5 knots, light southeast breeze for Clarence Strait. And for Sunday, south winds 10 knots here, central southern inside channel, southeast at 10 for Lynn Canal. Central and south coast, light south winds at 10 knots, and then east to southeast 10 to 15 knots on the north coast with 4 to 6 foot seas. Prince William Sound and eastern North Gulf Coast, light variable winds tomorrow at about 10 knots, northeast 15 there for the western North Gulf Coast. Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, east winds at 10 knots, variable winds at 10 for Cook Inlet. And for Sunday, Cook Inlet, north winds 15 knots. And east winds 15 to 20 knots out of the east for Kamishak Bay, the Barren Islands, the North Gulf Coast, all 20, except maybe up to 25 knots there around Cape St. Elias. East 15 for Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, north winds 15 knots. Kodiak Island for Saturday, east winds at 15 knots. Small craft advisories, the Alaska Peninsula, south-southeasterlies, 25 knots there. Southeast at 30 for Bristol Bay. Bristol Bay still looking at small craft advisories on Sunday. Winds east 30 knots, seas 6 feet. Lighter winds, more variable for the Alaska Peninsula, 10 to 15 knots. And northeast to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots for Kodiak Island. Eastern Aleutians, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots. West-southwest 15 to 20 in the central Aleutians. And west winds out west there 20 to 25 knots. Small craft advisories, western Aleutians on Sunday, southwest 25 knots there, Adak and Atka, southwest 20 knots, and the Fox Islands, west-southwest 15 to 20 knots with seas 7 to 9 feet. Gale warnings tomorrow, southwest coast and St. Lawrence Island, 35 knots for St. Lawrence Island out of the southeast, 40 knot southeast winds with 8 to 10 foot seas along the southwest coast and Nunivak Island. Small craft advisories for the Pribilofs, St. Matthew Island, south winds 25 to 30 knots. South 20 for the Pribilofs on Sunday, 25 knots south winds St. Matthew Island. Southeast 25 for the southwest coast and St. Lawrence Island. Call it southeast at 30 for Norton Sound. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east-southeast 15 tonight, southeast 15 for the central coast, southeast 10 on the west side. Small craft advisories for the Chuck CC for east to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots. And for Sunday, Chuck CC, southeast winds 20 to 25 knots. Western Arctic coast, east winds 15 to 20 knots, and east winds 15 knots for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea.